Hello, hello. All right. How's everybody doing? I want to welcome you here today, and we're waiting on more folks to arrive. But in the meantime, we won't hold up the program as a result of that. So I want to just welcome you all, and thank you so much for coming. I want to invite up Bishop Keith Clark to do an invocation for us, and then we'll kick it off.
Good morning to everyone. Let's bow our heads if you don't mind. Eternal One, how grateful we are for life and for the privilege of living. Thank you for bringing us here to this place and for this cause. We pray to God today that you would allow us to receive, to digest, to internalize, to share, to communicate, to hear, to understand, so that we can live in a city and in a space that is safe. It is up to each and every one of us. And if all of us have your leading and guiding, then our space will be better. So let us do that today. This is what we ask in Jesus' name, in respects to all faith. And everybody said amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, we had about 100, we sent out about 150 invites, about 100 folks confirmed. So my hope is that we'll start filling up these seats as the day goes on. But for now, I want to invite up a dear friend, Assembly Member Mia Bonta.
Good morning. How are we doing?
Good morning.
It's lovely to be with you all. I'm Assembly Member Mia Bonta, and I always get the proud honor to say that I represent the beautiful people of Oakland, Emeryville, and Alameda in AD 18, the strongest district in the state of California. It is my pleasure to be with you all today. I want to thank Don for creating a space for us to be able to be here, and welcome to the Elihu Harris State Building. And I think that this is such an appropriate place to have this conversation that you all are having. We know that Californians for Safety and Justice, Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, and REPAC are sponsoring and creating this opportunity for us to talk about our future with a policy forum and thinking about what our shared safety might be, and talking about breaking barriers 3.0. This has been several years in the making, a report that you'll have the opportunity to be able to review and digest and really dive into. And I can't tell you how important it is that we are having a conversation right now in this moment in time around our collective shared safety. Because we are in a space right now where we're moving back against the progress that we have achieved in the area of criminal justice, and we are moving back into a narrative around crime and punishment, and into a narrative around public safety, which doesn't include all of us. We have to know that on the ballot right now, we have things that are moving us backwards. And we need to be able to take hold of our narrative and take hold of our future by creating a paradigm that thinks about what you all and we all will talk about today, which is our collective and shared safety. And that being the true path, the real path for us to be able to move forward. So I'm deeply honored to be able to participate in that work and think about how we might be able to do that. And I'm thankful that over the years I've been able to really push back on this ideology that punitive measures, enhanced sentences, and increased law enforcement interactions for Black and brown people are going to lead to greater public safety for everyone. That is a false narrative and is not what I was trained by people in their lived experience, and not what I learned from people who are trying to re-enter into our community, what we need to do in order to be able to ensure that we are all together and safe and united and have community to be able to rely on. In the legislature, I had the opportunity to be our budget sub-chair in the Assembly for Public Safety. And I had to have conversations with CDCR all the time, both around oversight and around how we used our dollars, because always your budget speaks your values, right? And it's true, I heard Tanish say on the video there, reminding us that we right now spend less than 1% of a $14.6 billion budget in the state for prisons, for our carceral system. We spend less than 1% on supporting community-based frontline organizations to do the good work that we need. That is a mindset that is steeped in crime and punishment. That is a mindset that has nothing to do with the notion that reentry and rehabilitation and reintegration are actually what will keep us safe. So I've been able to push a little bit, make sure that we have some funds available to us with the right grant and other things to be able to do our work and to support the amazing work that our community-based organizations do. And I vow to you and commit to you that I will keep up that fight because it's now more important than ever. And I've also been able to focus on some legislation over the years that looks at youth restitution, a broken youth restitution system, where we are actually saddling people with more debt as a form of their restitution that they will not have the ability to pay, and will keep them from being able to have good credit, get a job, get a house, have a feeling of and a sensibility of financial well-being. And I'm very thankful for your partnership in making sure that that bill is on the governor's desk and hopefully will be signed. And I've also been thankful to be able to work with many people in the community around rethinking the way that we think about human trafficking and sex trafficking and being survivor-centered in that work. And I also will be focusing on that as we move on. So there is a lot of work to do. I want to share that the California Legislative Black Caucus, in particular, with ACA 8, which will ensure that we constitutionally prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude in our carceral system, is a priority of the Black Caucus, a priority of mine, and is something that is headed to the November ballot as Proposition 8. And that is work forward that we are doing together. But there's so much more that we need to do. Oh, sorry, my glasses, and there's a lot. Prop 6, thank you, brother. So we will continue to do this work. I commit to you all to make sure that we're doing this work together. And I'm so thankful that we are seeking to create a new paradigm around shared safety. And it's not just about the words related to that, but it is really about thinking about what it means for us all to be in community and have that feeling of safety, to be survivor-centered, to make sure that we all have a sense of well-being and that we all have a responsibility in that. Elected leaders, business leaders, community-based organizations, community members, together we have the power to be able to create an opportunity for shared safety. So your work is more important than ever. I'm so thankful that we're sitting down and going to get to dig in a little bit. I'm going to stick around for as long as I can. And then my team will be here throughout the rest of the day. I want to acknowledge our supervisor, Keith Carson, who is here as well, because this takes a city, county, and state and federal look at making sure that we're doing right by our community, and very thankful for all of the work that you all do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Bonta. I think, you know, in order to be in the building, in the state building, you have to have a sponsor. And Assemblymember Mia Bonta graciously sponsored us for this event today. So thank you again. I want to bring up our dear friend, Supervisor Keith Carson, District 5, to say a few words and kind of welcome and open up the start of the day.
Thank you very much, Donald. Good morning, everyone. Wait a minute. Are you guys texting or paying attention? What's up? Good morning. That's a little bit better. Thank you very much. I want to kind of take one moment, first of all, to underscore and acknowledge how important Assemblyperson Mia Bonta is. And I know this because we, from the county, got to constantly go to the state in order to get support and help, and go to the federal government in order to get support and help to provide services that are here. She opens the door. She's our access to all things in Sacramento from this area. And she's not just a person that has access. She's an advocate for all of the things that are important, that you hold important here. Doors always open. She's in the rooms where they're making the decisions on the dollars and also the policies and writing the policies. And to have that kind of relationship and be in those kind of places to fight for the resources that we need in this community, we couldn't have a better advocate than we have. And so I want to underscore that first and foremost and say a big thank you for all that you do for us. Going back and forth every day to Sacramento, living here, but going back and forth and trying to raise a family is challenging, but she's in those rooms. And so I want to underscore that. Thanks to Donald and thanks to Boss for the work that you do each and every day. This is an important forum, but the work that you do each and every day. I'm going to be real quick. I'm going to highlight three things. Lonnie Morris walked up to me a few minutes ago because he just left. Those who don't know Lonnie did 42 years inside of San Quentin, but he started No More Tears, which is a program to assist individuals on the inside in getting ready for coming out. And I say that because Donald has been an important part of that program almost since the inception, going in and out of San Quentin. No More Tears came up with an assessment program for people who come in to let you know not only their education level, their contact level back at home, their health care level, and all those things that you can work on while you're doing your time, but to be better prepared to come back and be an important part of our community, reassemble back into our community. Donald's helped to shape that program, and that program has been there. One part of that program, which is very appropriate for today, is that they bring in individuals periodically who've been victimized. People who have lost a family member, people who've been robbed, people who've been sexually assaulted, to bring in for discussion with, what do we have, 50, 70 guys in the room? And that conversation is quite emotional, because you don't even know if one of the people who assaulted or is involved is sitting in the room while you're telling your story of the impact to you as an individual, as a family member, as a part of the community. Everybody is emotionally involved when these coming togethers are, to understand that impact on both sides, the mindset when you're actively involved and the impact when these things happen to you, right? And I think that's important for today because of the fact that we're talking about how do we come together as a community, how do we acknowledge the fact that systemically there are laws and places in place that have caused the effect, that is added to the cause of the effect of the society that we live in now, not just in Oakland, but everywhere across this country. If you have a chance to go or talk to your relatives that live someplace else, it's the same thing there as it is here, unfortunately. Rural America, suburban America, urban America, it's all the same. And so these kind of convenings are not just to sit here and talk amongst ourselves, it's so that you go back to your respective organizations, your neighborhoods, and you share this information about how do we as a community take the shared responsibility for taking care of ourselves and our community. Only you can do that. Only you can do that. People who've had those experiences, people who have those relationships, people will hear you because they can relate to you and the relationships that you have in terms of shared responsibility. I'm going to end on this. I hope that your entire day is one that you take back to your respective communities. Share this information, say, how do we roll up our sleeves and get involved? Because if we don't, somebody else will. They may not represent your point of view. Thank you.
I do want to say that Congresswoman Barbara Lee would have been here if she could, but she sent a representative, Ms. Gums. I think you're still in the room, if you want to wave your hand. And she'll be back. So I just want to make that point, that this is a collective effort from the federal to the state to the county, as Supervisor Carson said, and also to the city. I want to, before I bring up the next speakers, I want to do a little housekeeping notes. And first of all, giving a very special thanks to Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Assembly Member Bonta, Supervisor Keith Carson, and Bishop Keith Clark for your ongoing support and commitment to social justice. I want to just let you know that 33 Angles will be filming throughout the day, and they may ask you your point of view. And so if you prefer not to be on camera, just let them know. They'll respect that. Also, we'll have a presentation and a panel discussion this morning. Then we'll take a group picture before lunch break. And then, again, if you don't want to be in the picture, just let us know. We'll accommodate that. And then we'll have group discussions based on the questions at each table. And I would ask that one person at each table volunteer to facilitate the conversation and one person take notes. So just kind of keep that in mind. And we're asking that part be figured out before the table discussions at 12:30. And I know you probably, we're not in that configuration right now, but I trust that you'll be able to figure that out. So now, for this convening, this Breaking Barriers 3.0, I want to give a quick retrospective on how we got here, right? So our first Breaking Barriers 1.0 that happened in this room back in 2018, and it was around collateral consequences. So Boss was the Alameda County representative. There's a statewide effort spearheaded by Californians for Safety and Justice around collateral consequences. So we had a large all-day meeting with the same players here. Supervisor Carson was here, city folks were here, folks with lived experience were here, and we kind of split up tables, right, and in terms of what the collateral consequences are for individuals with criminal backgrounds. So as it relates to employment, housing, just everything across the board. So we gathered all that information, and we were going back down to LA and sharing that information with the larger group. And then out of that produced a publication that then sparred Breaking Barriers 2.0, where we came back and we met at Greenlining this time, and we just disseminated that information that was gathered. And now we're here at Breaking Barriers 3.0, and our thought process was simple. So we said, let's just invite elected leaders, system leaders, business leaders, community leaders, returning citizens, systems impacted, law enforcement, advocates, service providers, and people with lived experience to have a conversation about shared safety. And we appreciate that you accepted the invitation and for us to collectively envision the possibilities of adapting the blueprint for shared safety in our county, in our cities, and in our neighborhoods. And now to introduce us to the subject matter of the shared safety discussion and a panel discussion that will follow, I want to introduce Tanish Hollins, the Executive Director of Californians for Safety and Justice, along with Sean Huff, Partnerships Director for Californians for Safety and Justice, to walk us through and give us a deeper understanding of what we mean when we say the blueprint for shared safety. So Tanish and Sean.
Good morning. How y'all doing? So we're going to get through this presentation and panel discussion, but I want to set the stage for this conversation. One thing is that we firmly believe that this, while it might be a presentation, thank you. You know I don't know how to use these things, right? So I'm gonna go back and forth. The clicker, I got it. Got it, thank you. While this is a presentation, we are gonna be engaging you in a conversation around the principles of shared safety. We know we have a lot of experience in the room. I'm excited to see so many faces here. I want to thank you to my brother Don Frazier and Boss for this amazing effort, but also for the way that you have been able to build your organization and anchor these principles and bring this blueprint to life in your community here in Oakland. And thank you for allowing us to be a partner. I also want to thank you, Assemblymember Bonta, for being a consistent voice in the Capitol and in community for these principles. At a time where a lot of folks who say that they have aligned with what we're talking about have flip-flopped on this issue, at a time where we see a lot of challenges in our communities. And to your point earlier, where we see a real effort to go back to the way things were done before, out of desperation, out of fear. And we know we can do better. So I want to thank you for your leadership, and also thank you to Member Carson for being here with us today and really grounding us on what it means to think broader about how we set ourselves up for safety. I also want to give a chance for my brother Sean to introduce himself, but for those of you who we have not had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Tanish Hollins. I'm the Executive Director of Californians for Safety and Justice. I hail from San Francisco, so for those of you from Oakland, thank you for welcoming your Frisco cousin over here on the side of the bay this morning. I always considered East Bay and Oakland specifically a second home. In my neighborhood that I grew up in, Bayview Hunters Point, being very similar to East Oakland and many pockets of Oakland. And so we share a common goal of seeing our people healthy and strong and building community. And there's so much rich history in Oakland that I've been able to learn from in my activism and organizing over the past couple of decades. I'm also a survivor of crime. I've lost brothers to gun violence. In my role with CSJ, one of the other roles that I have had the pleasure of holding over the past 5 years is being the state director of our Crime Survivor Network, Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. I know we have some of our members here today that you'll hear from later in our panel discussion. And we also are anchored, our other program that we anchor, bringing in the voices of folks who are impacted by the carceral system, Time Done. So both of those programs live under our umbrella, and we are actively engaging with folks who have that lived experience to inform how we make policy change, but also how we make shared safety real, whether it's through policy or in practice in community. So I'm excited to jump into this conversation with you, but before we do that, I'm gonna hand it over to my brother Sean.
Thank you. Am I on? Okay, there we go. So I am Sean Huff, California Partnerships Director with CSJ. Also have the pleasure of serving on the REPAC board. So really excited to be in this conversation. I get to come up a lot and work with Don and other community partners in Oakland. And so looking forward to this discussion and to hear from you on what shared safety looks like as well. So we will jump right in. There we go.
So as we do that, I want to invite you all to do two things. First is, I know everybody shuffled through traffic, if you like me, and found your way into this beautiful building and sat down, maybe had your coffee. But I want to just invite you all to close your eyes for a minute. And I want you to think of a time in your life where you felt the most safe. Think of a time in your life when you felt most safe. Where were you? Who are you with? What can you see? What do you feel? What can you smell? When you hear that word safety, what are the places and people and situations that come to your mind? And as you sit there for a minute, whenever you're ready to bring yourself back into this room, I wonder if there's anyone who's willing to share where you went or who you thought of when you thought of safety. Christmas.
Christmas with family, food cooking.
Yeah. Anyone else? What'd you think of when we asked you where you felt most safe? Come on now. I love that for a lot of reasons. Anyone else? Mama Stephanie, I saw your hand. There's some common themes. Anyone else?
Someone in the back.
Thank you. Y'all painted some very beautiful pictures of family, protection, community. I even noticed when my sister Dion said in East Oakland at the karate school, for a lot of people, East Oakland is not a place that they think of when they think of safety. But that was a safe place for her because that's community, right? That's home. And that's very important as we go into this conversation about shared safety. The next question I want to ask is, when you think of the words shared safety, what immediately comes to your mind? And don't worry about referencing this or looking at the document in front of you. Just that term, shared safety. What does it mean to you? What does it say to you?
Community responsibility.
Responsibility, community responsibility.
I think about getting along, figuring out to get along.
Cooperation, responsibility, getting along, unity, right? Self-awareness. What else? Unlearning, addressing trauma.
See, can I jump in?
Yes, please.
Can you define for us community as you used it in community responsibility?
People who, when I think of community, I think two things. One, in a general sense, people who live in the same space, right? So I live in deep East Oakland. And so I think of that being community. I also think of community being common objectives and goals. So when I think of community, shared space and then common goals.
Thank you.
I appreciate y'all sharing that as we go into this conversation. I think it's very important. Community, right? How we identify that, whether that's folks we live in close proximity to or the people who are in our network that we interact with or that we feel supported by or that we support. The word responsibility and cooperation, I think, was also very key because that says that we are taking accountability or ownership, right, of creating that safety with each other and for each other. I heard some things about alignment, right, and value, getting in the right mindset, and also unlearning, right, undoing some of the things that have guided the way that we do safety. I want to juxtapose that before we get into the shared safety model with two more words: public safety. What comes to your mind when you hear the words public safety? Say it again? Drugs, was that what I heard? Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the goal would be peace, right? And where there's not violence, where people are healthy, where they're living longer, where you don't have to be going to funerals. And so I would say public safety would be where you can walk outside and not have to worry about someone getting shot or getting a call that love died. So public safety would be, people where there's unity, where there's peace, and where we build each other up.
I think public safety where everybody.
Mama Stephanie, can you go back to why drugs came to your mind when we heard public safety? No drugs. Got you. Mm-hmm. Dion? Very, very good point. Most of the time when we hear the term public safety, it is in reference to our public safety systems, our public safety providers, with the intention of the environments that y'all described, right? Being able to walk down the street safely with your children, not have to worry about being victimized or see other people in your community suffering, right? But the words shared safety imply that we have a responsibility, we have a role to play in safety, right? Public safety can be created lots of different ways, but shared safety says we have some responsibility, we have a role in it, right? And so we're gonna dig into what that means and how that plays into the work that we've been doing and the work that Boss has been leading here, and so many of our partners around the state have been taking these principles and bringing them into their community, into practice, and building relationships with systemic leaders and with community leaders, and diversifying who we mean when we say public safety representatives, right? Part of our work is in challenging that, broadening that definition of who fits into that box when we say public safety. Whose responsibility is it? And then how do we achieve shared safety, right? What does that look like? So Sean, you want to jump in here?
So shared safety envisions a world in which everyone can attain safety and everyone takes responsibility for fostering it. Shared safety is a pioneering work of diverse stakeholders who are rethinking how to understand, invest in, evaluate, and achieve community safety. Now, we'll get into it a little bit later, but I want to put an emphasis on that, right? It's the pioneering work of diverse stakeholders. We have to, shared safety envisions a both and, right? Shared safety says that there is community responsibility in the sense that, or the definition that we are all living in this space together, even if you're in deep East Oakland, right? And it also involves those who have the common goal, as was described in or defined in community as well. That's going to be very important because we have to take this both and approach where it just doesn't fall on the community in the sense of those who are living in close proximity, right? Shared safety is one where everybody, all of the systems, all of the stakeholders has a responsibility. How many times have we been told that the community needs to do this, the community needs to do that, the community has to step up? And in fact, it is a both and. There are things within the community of proximity that can be done. But oftentimes what happens, and we'll get into a little bit later, is the resources that should go into the community to do the things that is said the community should be doing doesn't make it to the community. So Mama Hatton is hungry, and there's food deserts that exist in her community. When the funding or the resources come that should go into the community to address that problem, instead of getting into the community, a new department is set up, and we hire 5 people to study what's happening in the community. And then we say the community should then start community gardens. But funding was come to address this. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but I want us to think on that level when we're thinking who are the stakeholders that should also be a part of that conversation. So shared safety aims to shift the focus from penal or responses to crime to prevention, true accountability, and restoring the well-being of all communities. So the work starts by taking joint responsibility. Again, I highlight that, joint responsibility. Too often the community are blamed for the problems that are systemic problems, and the community is blamed for not solving them. We'll get into that later, but keep that in mind as you're thinking through shared safety. So as we get into it, when we look at the blueprint for shared safety, there are 5 blueprint principles. And I believe everyone has something on your table that shares those 5 blueprint principles. And for every one of those blueprint principles, there are 5 blueprint steps. So the principles are shifting to a public health frame, well-being is safety, crime survivors at the center, breaking the cycle of harm, and then making the system work. There are the 5 blueprint principles. Within each one of those principles, there are 5 steps. But before we go to the steps, let's look at what we mean by the 5 principles. So shifting to a public health frame. Applying a public health approach means addressing the what, when, where, and how that causes a lack of safety so that we can tackle the real underlying problems, not the symptoms. As you look at that definition, what do you think? How is that practical as we look at applying a public health frame? Thoughts? Let me overshare a little bit. I have been avoiding my doctor for the last about 4 weeks. About 6 weeks ago, I took some tests. My A1C numbers are really high. He's been calling me because I feel like he's going to tell me I need to get on some medication to avoid getting towards being diabetic. So I have been avoiding him because he's going to do some preventive measures to stop me from reaching a level where now it will become, he's treating symptoms where we can be at the prevention stage. I use it as an example to say that's what we mean by shifting to a public health frame. How are we addressing the root causes rather than treating the symptoms?
I would say right now we're not.
Okay.
Right now we kind of like putting Band-Aids over bullet wounds.
Okay.
And the communities are bleeding. I think a lot of times in the organizations that we work with also, some have very limited resources. And then, again, funding is going not to the community, right? So essentially, we're literally not tackling the root causes of things, which then reinforces the cycles of harm, also reinforces generational trauma as well.
So the public health frame says, let's look at prevention. They're always saying an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So how do we look at prevention? How do we look at addressing the what, when, where, and how that's happening in the communities that's causing a lack of safety? Then we move to well-being is safety. That's the second principle. Well-being means people are living in conditions that promote mental and physical health, connectedness and resilience. They have dignity and the resources to reach their full potential. Well-being is safety. So that means just simply saying that there are no drugs in the community is not the extent of what safety looks like. Looking at whether crime is rising or falling is not the extent of what safety looks like in the community. But true safety is when there's well-being, when people are in conditions that promote mental and physical health. True well-being is when we look at the causes and we say, okay, how do we solve the food desert problem that's happening in the community? How do we solve the lack of access to adequate mental and physical health facilities in the community? How do we solve the broken down, dilapidated buildings and overrun, empty parking lots in our community? How many people are familiar with the social determinants of health and mental health? All right, can you tell us what overall, what are they, and however you sum it up?
Within my context, it would be African-American health and social disparities.
Okay.
And so within that system, there's those risk factors that that cause these, and there's a spectrum of risk factors. It can be individual, it could be community, it could be environmental, it could be policy. And that's where the framework lies, is in the fact that there's health and social disparities, and that they are rooted in specific things that may be under the surface that people aren't recognizing.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you have a thought? You good? Okay. So everything that you said, and the thinking is that there are things that we can look at in the community, social determinants of mental and physical health. There are things that we can look at in the community that if they are there, then the science says we can determine based on the presence of those things, lack of food, lack of access to health care, lack of equitable economic stability, lack of public spaces for community to get together, lack of or the presence of blighted and broken down buildings. If we see these things in the community, these are the determinants that lets us know that it's going to be a high probability that we will have more people in this community with physical and mental health problems, just off of seeing those things. So when we get into well-being and safety, it goes beyond simply saying that we don't have, the crime rates go down or there's no drugs in the community, but saying there are things in the community that people need to have mental and physical health, to be connected and feel resilient. The third principle is crime survivors at the center. Placing survivors at the center means recognizing who is vulnerable to crime, amplifying investments in protection, trauma recovery, and restorative justice, and then partnering with survivors to understand and stop the cycle of harm. Breaking the cycle of harm. That's the fourth principle. Breaking the cycle of harm means reducing the harm caused by over-reliance on incarceration as the main tool of addressing crime. Breaking the cycle of harm. So, when incarceration is our only or the main tool, and we demonstrate that by, as was pointed out earlier, 1% of the state budget for incarceration, less than 1% equal, is going into communities to address the things that make community unsafe. So we're demonstrating that our reliance by a 14-point-something billion budget for CDCR is on incarceration. The cycle that causes, the cycle of destruction that we know mass incarceration causes to our community, to our families, to our young men and women who are without their parents, what it means to come back into the community to try to get back into work. How do we break that cycle of harm? How do we create it in a situation where I don't have to go to prison to get mental health support? I don't have to go to prison there are many programs that are only available for people who are in reentry when they come home. Remember, both and. Completely necessary. But how do we make those same programs accessible to people in the community before they go to prison so we can break the cycle of harm that's happening as a result of them going to prison? That makes sense? All right. So the fourth principle, breaking the cycle of harm, and then making the system work. So shared safety relies on cooperation, collaboration, and innovation. Again, this goes to the point we spoke about earlier. It's not just community responsibility as in the context of those who are living in proximity. But making the system work means the DCFS, the child welfare system, the social, criminal justice, health, behavioral health, foster care, all of the systems are working together in the second part of the definition that was given towards this safety framework. There is cohesion that happens. There is a process by which community feels safe to access the supports that's there. The system is working together to ensure that we have this shared goal of safety in the community. It just doesn't fall on community members. It includes community members, but also includes all of the systems working together to bring safety into our communities. So as we go through this and we begin to, part of our lunch exercise as well, is then how do we then look at those 5 steps? How do they work with the 5 principles? So if I look at shifting to a public health framework, how can we envision then safety in our communities when we're thinking about what it looks like to shift to a public health frame? What's the plan? Step 2, what plan do we have then to make this happen? How are we investing in this public health frame? Do we evaluate step 4? And then how do we strengthen the plan that we've been invested in, evaluated? How can we strengthen it? So do we adopt safety as a public health issue? Under plan, we align our health and safety delivery systems. Investing, we prioritize preventive health. Evaluating, we generate shared health and safety data systems. And strengthening, then perhaps we harness media to promote a public health frame. Any thoughts on those 5 principles and then the 5 steps? And you have that sheet on your table. Perhaps you've been looking at it most of the morning, figuring out what is this. So if we look at principle 2, well-being is safety. How do we envision well-being as safety? Perhaps we define well-being for our community. What does that mean for our community? Right, and that's an exercise that we will go through a little bit later on in the program. Identifying gaps in community well-being, scale up to meet the greater need, and then measure safety through real well-being indicators, and then cultivate a sanctuary for spaces for all. Extremely important. So that's kind of how that works. We don't want to go through it now because then we won't have anything to do after lunch as part of the exercises, right? We would have cheated, but really think through that. How do we take those 5 principles and then apply the 5 steps to making them a reality? Please, yes.
Can we go back to
Yes,
that
ma'am.
slide, if you don't mind? I want to talk a little bit about why, right? And I think some of it might be obvious. I mean, obviously, as Assemblymember Bonta pointed out, budgets are moral documents, so $14+ billion on the criminal justice system in California lets you know how much of a priority incarceration has been. Our organization came around in 2012 in response to over-incarceration in California, and we were tasked with passing legislation to try to reduce incarceration with the idea that we could use those savings to redistribute to create this vision, right? That's an important point to make right now in this moment, because criminal justice reform is being blamed directly for the public safety issues that we have right now. There's a narrative right now that's being pushed that we've gone too far, we've gone too soft, right? Because we were focused on prevention, because we wanted to be more holistic, because we wanted to take all these other things into consideration, that somehow we were avoiding accountability. What we're saying is we don't want to hold people accountable, we just want to care for them. It is impossible for us to do accountability right if we don't have these things, right? And I think that's an important part of this framework, why this is so important and so timely in this moment, especially as you all are thinking about how we do that when the issue of public safety is nationally the hot potato topic, right? And everybody's literally pointing fingers at each other. But criminal justice reform, our work to move away from relying on incarceration, is being blamed in this moment. We know that it's deeper and bigger than that, right? When we've over-relied on one system, we haven't scaled up to do public health the way that we should be doing public health, right? I know people in this room, I ain't gonna single them out, that have been saying for decades that the issues that we're facing in our community around violence and the systemic issues are public health issues. But we have not seen the same investment go into that, right? Here's the other thing. We haven't had a whole lot of time to vision anything different. Because most of the time, systems are doing two things. They're only responding, right? And the other thing they're doing is protecting itself, protecting the investment into the system. How many of us have worked in systems with the idea in the back of our head that we wanted to work ourselves out of a job one day? Like, I only went into government to work myself out of a job one day. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't want to be in a position where I'm seeing people come through a system that I know is doing them harm. I'm here to help them get out of it and hopefully fix it or repair it. We have never had time to envision, right? Or plan for, or invest in, or evaluate anything different. Here's the other thing that's happening in this moment. Not only is criminal justice reform being blamed, but the very work of our organizations, right, are also being discredited. We gave y'all X amount of money. We put a couple $1 million into your community. Why do you still have tents outside? You didn't house anybody. Why are people still struggling with addiction? You've gone too soft, right? All of the failure continues to be put back on the shoulders of the very people and the very institutions that we've been trying to build in without the space or the resources, right? Or the political will in some instances to try to bring this to life, right? But on the other side of that, we also know and can think of, because many of you are in this room, people who are doing this right now, right? We know people who are doing this work with shoestring budgets, going and bringing survivors together and making sure they have what they need. We know that there's incredible work being done right now to address trauma. We know that there's work happening right now to make sure that folks who are returning citizens have rights restored and that they get the support they need to get employment and move past these barriers and stabilize their lives. The issue right now is that those things are not given not only the same investment, but the same recognition when we talk about public safety. And they are all components of public safety. If victims are not being seen or supported, we are less safe. If people are coming out of incarceration with 40,000 lifetime restrictions, we are all less safe. If we are not addressing or building up our capacity to deal with mental health or substance abuse, if we are mandating people to go to treatment and we have a statewide shortage on treatment beds, we are less safe, right? So this is important for many reasons, but this is what you're looking at as an implementation plan. You're looking at an opportunity for you, a recipe for you to start thinking about locally, how are the ways that you can begin to align with each other to bring this framework to life in community. BOSS has been able to do some of that as an organization by bringing in these different components, from the Empowerment Center and Trauma Recovery to supporting folks who are reentering to supporting with employment and housing. A lot of us are working to take this holistic framework. But in order for shared safety to really be done to scale, we also need time to evaluate, we need time to invest, and we need intentional collaboration to strengthen it, right? That narrative is important right now, because I know in Oakland, and I know later, Boss, Don will talk more about this. Whether it's at the state level or locally, we all have opportunities right now through our vote, right? And through our collaboration, through our advocacy, to make sure that whatever resources are coming down give us the opportunity to work toward implementing this vision, right? So as you go into your breakout conversations later, think about that. Think about how this blueprint lines up for you in your work, who are the actors and players that you see as being central to this. I also want you to think Oakland is important, but this is regional, right? So many of our people have been displaced. So many people come here, don't live here. I'm in San Francisco, it's the same thing, right? People are there with the intent, but there's so many different things we gotta take into consideration. So I just wanted to offer that because this is more than just a clever idea. It's more than just us taking years of conversation and coming up with catchphrases. This is an actual game plan for how we work together to create shared safety that we are all invested in. That is what we really need right now. And one of the taglines from this work that was authored by one of our former colleagues about 7, 8 years ago is that safety is more than the absence of crime, it's the presence of well-being. So as this narrative continues to get pushed, right? And we're being pushed back on, and we're being told that you all taking this approach means that you're going too soft. The response is that we want to go smarter. We want to go smarter with how we address accountability and public safety. There's a smarter way for us to do this. It's less expensive, it's more effective, and we know that it works. Because not only do we have good data, we also have good examples, people who are in this room, who are products of what this looks like when it's done right.
All right. We want to, can you cue this video for us?
Okay, everybody, let's get started.
Think of a time when you felt most safe.
I feel safe when I'm conscious of processing my feelings, when I'm conscious of being aware of my surroundings.
How important is safety, especially for children and families, to allow people to dream?
Oh, the dream will keep you safe. Oh, you'll get up in the morning and you won't want to do anything but focus on that dream. I grew up in Kinloch, Missouri, a small town that sits on the border of Ferguson, Missouri. Let me tell you, it was so racist back then.
Wow.
I was warned, even as a little girl, never to go to Ferguson alone. But Ferguson had a movie theater, and we didn't. So I would sneak out on Saturdays, go up in the balcony with my 25-cent bag of popcorn, and imagine myself on the silver screen. And now, 68 movies later, children need to know they can be whatever they want to be.
People coming home from jail or prison, or people who are reentering society, who are in rehabilitation, face a lot of barriers.
When people are trying to re-enter society, that's when we have to be extremely supportive. They're going to be looking for a job. And we have to help them with that transition so they don't commit the same crime over and over again, so they can feel safe. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was 33 years old, and I didn't want to believe it. There's a resistance to being told that you're sick. We don't want to believe it. It doesn't matter what the sickness is. It is nothing to be ashamed of. I went into therapy because I wanted to feel better. I believe that human beings have one job on this planet: self-care. If you're not healthy, who are you going to help? What are you going to do with your life if you're not healthy?
Trauma recovery. How important is that for safety right now? Thinking about everything that we just experienced with the pandemic, people are living in their trauma. How important is addressing that healing for safety?
During COVID, the isolation people experienced had an effect on us.
Yes.
The suicide rate climbed to a height that is unspeakable. And I know one of the issues is that a lot of Americans cannot afford therapy.
Yeah. A lot of the reason why we don't feel safe is because we don't have all the tools and resources that we need to create safety in our communities the way that we need to. A big part of this conversation is really to help people to dream and imagine. We need more resources so people have the space and the room to do that. Everyone has a personal responsibility to access, do better, make better decisions. What this campaign is really about is making sure that we have the resources available for people who are making that choice. In 2022, state of California put $14 billion into jails and prisons. If we took 1% of that money and put it into trauma recovery, substance abuse prevention, mental health, for people to have stable housing, opportunities for employment for people who are reentering society, do you think that would improve safety?
Absolutely. Safety is more than the absence of crime. It is the presence of well-being. Visit justsafe.org and tell us what safety means to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so what we want to, as we go into the question and answers, is to center that, to make our conversation that we're having now a public health, public safety conversation. How do we move it within, not only within our communities, but within our work? From not just being criminal justice reform, but about public safety and the right for all to be safe. And then what does that look like in our community? It doesn't look like, perhaps we think it doesn't look like more policing. Perhaps we think it doesn't require more police officers in our community or more people going to jail, but we need the resources to implement the things necessary to keep people from getting there in the first place. We need greater access to the things we identify, mental health supports, access to equitable health care, safe places where we can gather and be in community, right? Those are the investments that we need. So we're having the wrong conversation. We are having, when we're talking about going back to mass incarceration, we are grossly treating the symptoms. Who's addressing the causes if all of our resources, all of our conversations are around simply the systems? So I want to stop there and we'll move on, begin with our panel. But first, any thoughts, questions that would come up now? Yes, sir.
Remedy I think would be profitable is if there were programs that persons who are on streets that are addicted to drugs, where is it for them to go in San Francisco or Oakland to go to a center and say, hey, I'm on drugs, can you help?
Right.
When I was on drugs in 2003 to 2004, I believed in God and my mom. And I got off drugs on my own. But I'm just saying, for other people that don't have the strength and the power, willpower within themselves, where else can they go to solidify themselves getting recovery so they won't lead back to going to prison or doing a crime to get themselves in that predicament to be able to get in that situation? What do you guys have as programs for that?
So,
or is it there are programs out there?
There are a lot of programs like that out there. Boss is one of them, but they're not enough.
Right.
And that's the conversation.
Right.
Right? That's the concept of shared safety. It's centering the voice of those who are impacted. You at the room saying, I should not have to get arrested.
Right.
Someone should not have to get arrested in order to access treatment. That investment should be happening in our community, that we have more programs, because the programs that are there work. There are just so few that the waiting list is, around the corner, the waiting line. So we need more investment in these things because we're not seeing them in the way that will impact the safety in our community. So that there are some, but we need more, and that's what the conversation has to be. Not more incarceration.
Right.
We need more programs that will address the issues.
What about the stronger addiction for people who, like, crystal meth is more of a poison?
Mm-hmm.
Crack cocaine is different because it comes from a plant. But when you're dealing with chemicals and imbalance of the brain, it takes more of a stronger medication to be able to stop the addiction than it is for other drugs. So I'm saying most of the people that I see now that's out on drugs now is on the crystal meth thing and the fentanyl. Those things are way more stronger than the crack cocaine and cocaine drug.
Okay, I'm gonna trust your expertise on that one, and
know
then
for a
I'm
fact.
gonna trust. That's why I said I ain't gonna argue with the expert in the room. That's what I'm not gonna do.
I'm just
But
specifically getting to the point, like, what can we use and what can we come with that can help people? Because when these people out here committing these crimes and doing the things that they do, it's mostly because they're on a stronger drug that was back then. It's way more stronger than that.
And so again, thank you, and you have highlighted why having and centering the voices of community and survivors is extremely important, because that has to be not just in this room, but at the system level, where we're talking about the shared safety approach, where we're talking about where are the investments that's happening in our community, where they can hear from. But y'all keep bringing these weed programs here. That's not what we need. We need something that addresses exactly what you just said. And so please stay connected and stay in the room, because we have to have your voice.
Honestly, I use peanut butter milk to get me from my addiction,
to
stop the cravings from my stomach to be coated.
Okay,
And
well, I want to stop right there, because I don't want nobody else to go do some peanut butter milk and they have an allergic reaction. Then they say we told them that that's going to help, right? But if you want to know how he did it, talk to him afterwards, because he can tell you how, by the grace of God, it worked for him. Don.
So I wanted to say, in terms of just kind of centering the conversation, right, that the idea of the shared safety piece, and I definitely appreciate the global perspective, is really around, from my point of view, collaboration, right? And so we are all in this room from different areas, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's City of Oakland, Alameda County, lived experience, returning citizens. So everybody's in a room. The idea around this is, how do we collaborate? How do we coordinate, right? Because I think that's the missing piece, right? And then start to envision that first principle. How do we envision what we could become, right, in this shared safety framework? I'll give you an example. Like, Boss does a lot of great work, but a lot of folks in this room do some excellent work, right? So I wanted to single Boss out. Maybe it's because we're hosting the event, but I definitely want to give credit and kudos to everybody in the room who's doing fantastic work. I'll say this. We opened up a trauma recovery center in East Oakland. We couldn't do it without a letter from law enforcement. And guess who wrote that letter for us? It was Sheriff Sanchez. And she had just got elected. I don't know if she knew Boss from a bucket of paint, but she gave us that letter, and that helped us get that trauma recovery center, the first and only trauma recovery center in the city of Oakland, right? Jenny is here from Department of Violence Prevention in the city of Oakland. DVP funds many, many programs throughout the city that does excellent work, right? And the idea around this is, how do we come together, right, and collaborate so that we know what's going on, we know who's who, we know what's where, right? And then we can start really putting this plan together, like helping it make sense. We're going to ask folks later on in the program to take a pledge to commit to coming back, to commit to this process, right? You don't have to, but we strongly urge you to, because we think this is important. And I think the missing link here is when we talk about that last goal around communication, collaboration, and coordination, right? How do we connect with clergy who's in a room, right? With law enforcement who's in a room, with service providers who are in the room, with folks with lived experience who are in the room, folks who are returning citizens in the room, right? How do we come together and collaborate so that we know what's happening? Not just in the city of Oakland, but throughout Alameda County, but we can certainly start with Oakland. And I'll stop there. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yep.
Prop 36 is on the ballot. I'm changing hats. I'm taking off my CEO boss hat, and I'm putting on my REPAC hat. REPAC is the Reentry Providers Association of California. So I'm the executive director with that organization as well. Now, Prop 36 is on the ballot. What Prop 36 does, and I was talking to Assemblymember Bonta about this, is polling at 70%. It's polling at 70%, which means it might pass. If it passes, it's going to take away all of the impact that the good impact that Prop 47 gave to us. So it's going to create felonies for shoplifting and drug crimes, right? Small drug crimes. Where Prop 47 eliminates that, right? There was no more felony charges for those crimes. So if 36 passes, 47 goes away, which means all of these programs that we created, that trauma recovery center that the sheriff helped us establish at Oakland, goes away, right? The adult reentry grants that were established for rental assistance and for warm handoff and case management services for folks who've done any time in CDCR at any point in their life, goes away, right? CalVIP funding, right? The California Violence Intervention and Prevention funding goes away. Folks need to know this, right? Then there's Measure Double N in Oakland, right? And that just reinstitutes our Measure Z funding for violence prevention work, right? We need to know that. So from an impact the vote perspective, we need to understand what's on the ballot, right? Again, I'm wearing my hat of the executive director of the Reentry Providers Association of California. I want to make that clear. We're filming. And but the importance of it is paramount. So I just wanted to get that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Incarceration is going to give more. Thank you. It's going to institute more funding to the correctional facilities, which means less funding to the community organizations. So if we can get behind 33, and let's make sure that doesn't happen because it's going to make it devastating on our communities. But one thing I wanted to say before I give the microphone back to the moderator is that I feel that we need to reconnect with our communities. People talk about funding and we talk about various needs, and I think one need we need to do is go back to what we used to be when we provided for ourselves. Our neighbors looked out for one another. We had problems, or we didn't have problems we have today. People cared about each other. We took care of each other's kids. We made sure we went to school. If my mom saw me hooked in school, or if my aunt saw me hooked in school, believe me, my mom was told. We don't have the same type of connection we did then. If we had that, I feel we could start to reconnect and reinstitute our wholeness. And I think that's what's missing. So let's try to remember community, because that's important. Without community, we can't go very far with anything else. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Yes, sir. And we'll let that the last question, then we'll go into our panel.
It's not so much of a question. I would like to reiterate what the two gentlemen said.
Yes, sir.
About communication with society. I'm a returning individual after 38 years for a crime I did not do. I'm not patting myself on the back for it, but since I've been home, within 4 years, I've been working with 5 Keys in San Francisco. And the young man talked about the drug system, the way it is. It's not many people's organizations that open the doors. I have created for myself, as well as a nonprofit for young youth, to stop them before they go behind the wall. this is the biggest thing. We have a lot of things going on for young adults, whether older adults coming home, males mostly. There are young ladies that's coming home, and not many organizations is reaching out to them because they're coming home with babies. And there's no one saying, okay, we have a room for you with your kids. Okay, but it's not many there, and I feel the communication with society as well as CDCR, they're more focused on getting their money back because over the past 30 some odd years, 40 years, they've been holding people past their time. I supposedly came home in 93. I didn't make it home until 2020. Okay, so the system is wrecked. The money that's being pulled from the drug programs and stuff that's going back to CDCR is all systematically playing.
Got it.
And I was given this by an individual, told me about the program here. I was coming back. When I first come home, I attempted to get a job with BATS with a couple other organizations, but because BATS was allowing so many people to come work for them, the list was very long. Okay. And I will tip my hat to BATS because they do consist of that. This program is going to be needed, these type of events, on a consistent basis. And other people need to get in and start them as well. And I want to give kudos to everyone here, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but thank you guys for being here, taking consideration and thoughts for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And so we're going to transition to our panel. Just as our panelists, and Tanish will help us transition into that. Want to really reiterate something that Don shared. This is about cooperation. So when we are hearing there are women coming home with children, shared safety looks like all of the players at the table. Who has the resources? How do we address this? We're hearing from community. We're hearing from all of the system players that where we can cooperate. We say, okay, CDCR or Department of Parole or probation. How can we identify that? Who can we refer them to when they get home? How is the community set up waiting? Community, what do you need to be prepared? Who are the programs or what's happening within the community that exists now, right? That is the shared safety model. We all have a responsibility. It doesn't fall all on community, but it falls, community is incorporated in the conversation. And so that means, one, we have to start having conversations in community. Two, we have to have access to the other rooms where the conversation is happening. We're all at the table. We all need one another. It's an approach. It's a shared approach to safety in our community that's not about blame. Accountability, but not blame. And getting to the goal of well-being in our community where everyone, not only is there the absence of crime, but there is the presence of the things necessary to be healthy and to walk in well-being. So with that, we'll move to our panel, and then we'll get that going, and then we can get ready for some lunch.
Keep this so I can watch time because I don't want y'all waiting until 1 o'clock to eat lunch and you'll be mad at me. So I want to thank y'all for making your way up here. You want to do a brief little introduction so everyone knows who you are? Tell a little bit about yourself, where you're from.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Amador, Stockton Chapter Coordinator for Time Done under Californians for Safety and Justice, and I organize throughout Northern California for people with old conviction records that advocate for policy change to remove barriers to success and opportunity post-conviction, right? And so basically what that means is that when we come home from jail and prison and we just want to move on with our lives and take care of our families, that we want to be allowed to do so without our records being constantly pulled up to deny us jobs and housing when we try to do so, right? Because when you think about when an individual's records are pulled up, when a background check is pulled up, which is a consequence of a multi-billion-dollar background check industry that profits off of exploiting people's worst mistakes to deny them positive opportunities, when those background checks are being ran, it's usually when we're trying to do something right, when we're trying to do something good, when we're trying to move our families to a better place to live, when we're trying to get a house, when we're trying to get a job, when when we went through college and put in years to get associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and we go to apply for a job with that degree and a background check is ran, and the felony outweighs your bachelor's degree, right? Those are real problems that need real solutions. And I also work to do case management and court advocacy in Stockton. Traditional justice system is that when I was 18 years old, and I'll keep this quick so I can pass it. But when I was 18 years old and I went to prison, the CDCR staff, when they asked me, they didn't ask me, what are your hopes, dreams, what are your aspirations, what are you struggling with? How can we get you how can we help you get your high school diploma? How can we help you get a degree? How can we help you get you to trade school? Do you need counseling? They asked me, what prison gang do you want to fall under? Think about that. And also think about the gangs throughout California and how they originate from prison and how mass incarceration contributes to that issue, right? But beyond that, when I came home from prison and I work with community-based organizations, I'm not asking people, or when I came home from prison and then my PO asked me, were you home were you home before your curfew, and did you have any contact with law enforcement? No, thank you, see you next month. But now that I work with a community-based organization and we do reentry services, I'm asking them, do you have a resume? Do you need a job? Do you need counseling? How's everything going on with home? Do you have issues with your spouse? Do you have issues with your mother? Do you want to get into these formerly incarcerated college programs that we have on a community level, and on a university level, and at a graduate level, right? We're working to break these cycles of poverty, harm, and incarceration by addressing the root causes and not just figuring out how we can lock people up. And that's something that needs investment in, because the more people we can reach to help them with their struggles before crisis becomes crime, the more murders we prevent, the more armed robberies we prevent. But it's hard to calculate that, because it doesn't make, what's not seen doesn't make headlines.
Now, before you get into that, I'm gonna stop you right there, because I feel like you about to go right into where we're gonna go. So I'm gonna stop you because you're getting into the good part. But welcome, my brother Ben. Miss Stephanie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hatton. I'm an honored member of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. I tap in with time done, and I'm very interested in our new Progress Not Prisons. I'm a manager at a drug and alcohol facility. Safe Just is something that I utilize in my life to make sure that I stay professionally accountable. I'm currently working with state parole, probation to assist them, because they asked me to help them be professionally accountable. The funding that we get that we might lose, that funding is not being appropriately distributed. And so my goal in Stockton, California, is to make sure that my community is safe from all angles. Drug and alcohol is another gun. Fentanyl is another 9 out there on the streets. And part of my responsibility is to make sure that I save those lives, assist those lives, and assist in the well-being and care of my community.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mama. So I just want to go back to that. Miss Stephanie is a survivor, right? As a leader of an organization that directly works with people who have substance abuse, and I hear you talking about the systems that you're interacting with, parole and others. Why is it, people kind of ask me this question too as a survivor leading a criminal justice reform organization. Why is it, or how do you feel as a survivor leading this work, how your voice impacts the decisions that are being made? Why is it important to have your voice and your leadership as a survivor in this conversation around safety from the work that you do?
Because I'm the truth. I was a part of that unsafety participant out there in the streets. And I speak to all that I engage with from experience, and I guess that's accepted as appreciative now. Just being able to tell my truth to those who doubt that we even need to be a part of society has really helped my relationships, have made some significant changes in how we do our business, how we do our collaboration. A lot of them didn't want to listen, and I try to very hard to get their focus, especially when they ignore it. My voice, my truth penetrates them, and I know it does because of my success that I have contributed to the city of Stockton. Half of those people working in the city of Stockton is because I assisted, and I trained those to do what I do and how I do it from my truth. I've trained those who've never been through what I've been through to work and handle their business as if they had went through the same trials and tribulations that I have.
So that lived experience is a very, very important part of us being able to get it right and move people to success.
Yes.
Ben, you were talking a little bit about that earlier when you gave your story about being young and incarcerated, and it seemed very clear that there was a path that was being determined for you, and now you are empowered and empowering other people in the work that you do in community to have a different path. Why is that so important for this conversation around public safety, shared safety that we're having right now?
It prevents murder. It prevents drug overdose. It prevents homelessness. It prevents a whole host of violent crime, right? And the reason why is because when you address issues, when we're talking about community development, you can't have community development without personal development of the members of that community. So what that means, right, is that you could go into a building and you could repaint all the structures and you could redo the sidewalk, but if the people inside of that community are still struggling on a personal level, they're still struggling to keep their marriage together, they're still struggling to keep their household together, they're still struggling with emotional issues, maybe drug problems or unemployment, or they're not making enough, and the narrative right now is very quick to point to reform as the problem for the socioeconomic issues that are going on in our communities, yet they fail to bring up that the cost of living virtually doubled and tripled over the past couple of years. That in the same time when crime rise to pre-lockdown levels, which was still historic lows, at that same time, suicide was rising. Hopelessness is rising. It's hard out there. People need help. People need to get on their feet. People need assistance. We need community more than ever in a time where our world and our society is more disconnected than ever, right? And so that's how come we need more investment in these organizations, into these programs that work to build our community members up, but to bring them together in community so that we can create that system of where we could reach out and help each other, right? Because we landed on a solid quote the other day when we were having the discussions. We don't have a competency problem because we know what our people need. We know how to help them. We have a capacity problem, because if we only have the capacity to reach 1% of the people struggling in our communities, how could you blame us for the 99% that are still struggling that we can't reach, because all the funding is being reallocated to guns and handcuffs and cells instead of resources that people need.
That's a really, really powerful point. Powerful point that we don't have a competency problem. Like, we know what our people need, but the capacity, and that came up earlier, right? And let's not, we don't want to be dismissive that there are real problems. The problems are not just in community with how we manage our resources. It's also with government and how government manages resources. And you can see it. It's all over the news, unfortunately, but it's a real thing. So while we're working against that, right, we are still making impact in our communities because we're doing it every day. Ms. Stephanie, can you talk a little bit about the impact that you have been able, your program's been able to make with folks who are struggling with addiction, the kind of daily wins that you see?
The daily wins is when I meet a man coming out of prison, because I work with men, and he comes in with an open mind, with a committed mind. And once he completes treatment, I watch a man step into a world of employment, walking out of there with self-respect and decency, has changed his language to be a part of this community, has made some personal choices so he can redefine himself as a decent human being and a man wearing his own shoes. There's no more crime. There's no more homelessness for him. There's no more money spent on probation or parole. And there's no more food stamps. The degradation that I've heard from men who have to get out of prison and apply for food stamps put me in tears. And to see that pride and that personal independence step in, and then they create a family or reunify with family, that's the pride in what we do. And we tap into so many doors till no one speaks. When you shut somebody down off dope, right, you contribute to a lot of other things. You like I said, you don't have to worry about him going back to prison. You don't have to worry about him being a menace or a parasite. You don't have to worry about him being abusive. You don't have to worry about him being a part of that homeless. One choice satisfies a whole other things. And if we reach one, teach one, being daily, we've created a co-population that is now full function. And to see a man have that look of pride, where prison and the streets and drugs and somebody controlling his life, when all that is gone and you see him as he truly is, that is the gratitude, because I know that any youngster that come in contact with him gonna get the truth. And he gonna be able to save that life. That's what I feel.
I love that.
That's real to me.
We see some of those beautiful examples of that kind of pride in our community every day. There might be some in this room, right? That's part of their personal testimony. Ben, I wonder if, when you think about the day-to-day, especially for people who are reentering and trying to, rebuild their lives, what are some of the tedious what are some of the tedious, unnecessary barriers that you see people come up against every day that we know can be removed to make their reentry easier?
Just getting a job, just for one, right, among many. But when people are coming home from jail and prison and they come into our organizations and other organizations out here in the community, the most, I don't want to say annoying. Yeah, I will say that. The most annoying question, not annoyed with them, but annoyed with our society, is where do they hire felons at? Where can I get a job with a felony record? Because I've been applying, and either they don't call back or when they get my background check comes back, they walk me off the premises and let me know that my background check came back and they're gonna have to go with somebody else, right? So when people are ready and willing to move on with their lives, the last thing that we should do as a society is make it harder for them. And then not only that, when the people need to travel, it doesn't make sense to put travel restrictions on them when we know that the highest paying jobs are typically outside of our areas, outside of our counties. It's a commuting economy now. We see that when we're going down the 580, the 205, when we're trying to cross the Altamont, and we're sitting in traffic for 2 hours. It's a commuting economy, and our people need to be able to travel unrestricted with these unnecessary rules under the threat of arrest and being thrown back in prison, right? But I guess to better answer that question is, our people need more help. We need more investment in our community-based organizations. We need more investment in our credible messengers that can connect with the people in our community and help them break these cycles of trauma, harm, and incarceration before it becomes necessary for law enforcement to have to respond. We need more investment.
More investment. We got a couple more minutes, and then we're gonna close out just for lunch. But I had one more thought. As we were given this example of, how we could see the impact of our work, and then thinking about those little things, right, that come up in the way of people's progress, and how this ties into this conversation around shared safety. We, in our work, really see ourselves as the solutions lobby, right? When we come into a room, when we come to advocate, when we introduce policies, our intention is to bring solutions forward, right? And these are big problems that we're talking about. These are big issues, long-standing issues, systemic issues, but there are also some very practical solutions that can be put in place, some very intentional steps that can be taken if we're collaborating to make things easier for people, right? And an understanding that if we're gonna adopt the same strategy that systems have had for decades that we know failed because these are the rules, that we're probably gonna get the same outcomes, right? We understand that we have to, in order to give people access, we have to have some flexibility. So when you're thinking about your shared safety model, how are you including flexibility? How are you creating more access? How are you removing barriers for people? Whether it's as simple as making it easier for people to get things like their ID, their birth documents, right? Whether it is thinking of differently about the ways that we do access to employment. We know that we're in an electronic-based society right now, but we are still very much dependent on relationship. So how are we utilizing these relationships? How are we utilizing technology to be at the advantage of people who are already experiencing barriers? Because there is nothing more discouraging than, one, having to be asked, where would they hire somebody like me? And then two, pointing someone to a system where their name gets lost in a void with hundreds of thousands of other people, right? How many of y'all remember a point in time where we used to have case managers and systems navigators and people who were daily kind of holding hands with folks who were walking back into life? You remember them days? We don't see that as much as we used to, right? And some of that has to do with the way funding streams have been designed. It's very metric based, right? How many people showed up, how many people did that, how many things were submitted. But that qualitative piece is what our people need right now. And so when you guys are thinking about this blueprint and you're envisioning what does it look like if we're going to make sure that survivors, that people who are struggling with addiction, people who are coming back to society who may have barriers, or even just our neighbors and friends who want to figure out how can they be a part of the solution? Where do I fit in this, right? How are we making it accessible for people to hold some responsibility for this shared safety? There is a role for everyone if we're thinking creatively, right? And so I wanted to, just kind of pull this out. I know a lot of times And I say this myself as a survivor, normally when we're on these panels, we spend a lot of time talking about our own personal trauma and lived experience. But I wanted to shift this and really talk more about the roles that we play in this shared safety model, and how we have been able to empower others because we have the insight of where we know our people are going to get caught up, right? But how do the question I want to close out on is, how does what you know now influence things like policy and decision making? What is the power in that you see, Ms. Stephanie? How do you see the power in your lived experience, the work that you do, showing up in policy? How are you able to change policy with your story?
Just once again, presenting the truth. For those of us who have experienced certain things, you know, we know exactly what's necessary and what's needed. So you asked Ben about barriers. We think about that. How could it been easier to transition? We think about all those things that we were deprived of or would have assisted us in, and we take that and we voice it because it comes from a place of honesty, you know, and there's no other way to put it. Just knowing I had something when I got out of the penitentiary, you know, or I had something when I tried cocaine. You know, there was nothing, you know, but a helicopter to CIW. Okay, there was nothing there. And so when you're in this field for almost 30 years like I have, and we still running into barriers, well, I'll never forget my truth, and that's what I try to voice whenever I'm approached so that we can make that continuous change, because the change is a long process, and it's continuous.
Yes, it is.
Just telling my truth.
Yes, it is. That truth shifts things. Ben, how have you seen your truth shift things, shift decision-making, shift policy? What role are you playing in that?
Because now as adults, as community organizers, as budget and policy advocates, we remember how we slipped through the cracks in our youth, because we are the kids that were gave up and left behind. We as adults were the kids that were gave up on and left behind and pushed out of the institutions that were supposed to be there to help us, like school. We were the kids that got kicked out of class, that got expelled from school, that got put into opportunity classes where we're escorted by guards to and from the bathroom, and high school doing second grade level work just to collect the funding for us showing up. We were the kids of broken homes, of broken communities, of broken economies. We are the kids that didn't have programs, that didn't have people asking us, what do you need? What are you struggling with? How can I help you get a job? How is your relationship with your family? How is your relationship with your girlfriend? How can we help you not get killed because you're being hunted by 30 guys from across town? We were those kids, and now we're the adults fighting for those kids. That's how that helps me.
Thank you for sharing that. I want y'all to send some love and positive energy up here and some appreciation to Miss Stephanie and to Ben. And I hope our conversation, you know, we talked a lot about the framework and, you know, how all these different players fit in, but the real secret sauce to this is centering the experiences of people who have lived it, who are now guiding others through it. Those cracks were identified decades ago, right? And it is on us to make sure that they get filled and they get repaired. And you need to have people who are skilled in that process to be a part of it. You need to have people who can identify those cracks to be a part of the repair. So I hope that as you all go into after lunch, your breakout discussions and start thinking about the who and the how, that all of this inspires your thinking on what shared safety looks like in Oakland, in the Bay Area, throughout the state. This is a very intentional body of work that we lead, and we will continue to partner with you all as you build it out on how you implement it. Because I want to close out by saying there are some great opportunities for implementation through the laws and through the changes that we've been able to make. Laws like SB 731, which was pushed by our Time Done members and pushed by CSJ, which now automates record expungement for people. We have thousands of people in Alameda County who need their records cleared, who need to know that they're eligible for that, right? There's an opportunity right there. We've worked very closely with BOSS and some of the other organizations that may be here to do that work, and we'll continue to do it. For our survivors, we pushed at the state level for millions of dollars to become available starting next year, or maybe the end of this year, to provide direct cash assistance so that our families, our folks who have been directly impacted by crime, are not waiting to try to get relocated or waiting to get burial assistance or waiting to get help. All of that is a part of public safety. All of that is a part of shared safety. So with all these opportunities coming, I hope that this presentation and this discussion inspires you all to start thinking about how you make that real and the ways that we might be able to support you all in doing that.